This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD via Zoom Natalia Mahmud of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council. How are you today, Natalie?
I'm
Natalia,
great.
I'm sorry, Natalia.
No problem. Hi, Trudy. I'm great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned, but if it's not that big of a deal, but try to not mention my name on the air. When we're on the air, our wizards try to remain anonymous. Off the air is okay, but on the air, we try to remain anonymous. Awesome, awesome.
Got it.
So Natalia, first of all, tell us a little bit about the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council and your role in it as a program director.
So the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council came together about 5 years ago, a little bit more than that. It was spring of 2016, right before the results of the presidential election were announced, and a group of prominent Muslims and Jews from different walks of life were just troubled by what was going on around the country with the rise in hate crime statistics. Every year, the FBI releases its annual report about the state of hate crimes that are reported to local localities. And we saw a sharp increase against hate crimes against the Muslim community. And year after year, the largest targets of religious-based hate crimes is the Jewish community. And that, along with the political rhetoric at the time where Muslims and Jews, their identities were pitted against each other, felt that there was a coalition that should be in place to help stem back against this rise of hatred against the communities itself. So AJC, the American Jewish Committee, along with ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, came together and formed this coalition of prominent Muslims and Jews from different walks of life, which is the case of American Muslims and American Jews in America, came together to form this coalition. And the purpose was to jointly advocate on issues of common concern. And I am the program director, so I help, help set the agenda in consultation with the members, with our co-chairs, Stan Bergman and Farouk Katwari, who are CEOs of these major businesses in the United States. And I also oversee the now 11 regional councils that are across the country.
You must have a lot on your plate because there is so much to advocate for. But however, do you know which side initiated the Muslims and the Jews working together? Because in the beginning, 5 years ago, was it the Muslims or the Jews?
I don't think it was one or the other. It was just this need, and it happened to be because the communities were felt under attack by what was happening in the country. So I don't think it was just one approaching the other. Mm-hmm. The relationships have always been there, but AJC helped co-convene the council with ISNA at the time.
And so where was the first council then? Was it in New York?
The council is a national council. We've got members from every corner of the United States who are part of the coalition. But the first meeting was held in New York.
Because I know that you said that there are 11 chapters, right? And then
yes.
Where was the first chapter?
The first chapter had actually started forming and been meeting informally, but it came together under the umbrella of MJAG, and I believe that was Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it's called the Circle of Friends, the local chapter there.
And Circle of Friends is both groups together, right?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. In all our council, all the chapters, we've got it follows the same model where we've got an equal number of Muslims and Jews, broad representation of different professional fields, but they identify as either Muslim or Jews. And the idea is to, in addition to just building, coming together and having these friendships with the members, we work on advocating on change regarding a particular advocacy topic. For a lot of these chapters, that is hate crimes, as is the case for the National Council. So we've got a National Council and then 11 regional chapters.
Mhm. And did the Circle of Friends exist before the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
I think it was simultaneously. It was they were meeting, and when MJAC, the National Council, was formed, it just happened to be coming together under that larger umbrella.
What about the native countries such as the Israel and then the Middle Eastern countries? Do any of your native countries have any part in the work of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
Naturally, the issues of what's happening in the Middle East is very dear to our members here in the United States, but MJAC, which is the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, our focus is domestic policy and making sure that we're able to advocate for change here in the United States.
So,
and we stay away from issues that are taking place outside the United States, be it the Middle East or what's happening in Asia or Africa.
Oh, we understand that. It's just that it seems as if there are, the families are so intertwined and close and widespread, spread apart. And then I was just wondering how if there might be any international connections as well to help your work. That's all.
And, understandably, but at the same time, one of the things about our council, MJAC, is that we focus on one issue at a time and an issue that impacts both Muslims and Jews equally. Naturally, there are issues that are happening overseas, things that are taking place in Kashmir, in India, Pakistan, the Middle East, but those issues are not impacting the two communities equally here in the United States. So we stay away from them. Of course, our members deeply care about those issues and they're free to advocate or, bring change to and highlight those issues outside of the council.
And so how, after 5 years of work, have you seen any progress? Surprisingly,
we have, given the political climate here in the United States, it's an advocacy coalition. So the first piece of federal legislation that the National Council advocated for was to expand the federal protection of religiously affiliated institutions. The federal statute at that time, of course, protected mosques, churches, synagogues, gurdwaras, but when the JCCs were receiving those bomb threats that were being called in, there was a need for a federal legislation that expanded the protection to those institutions like the Islamic centers and the Jewish community centers. And there was a legislation that was introduced on a bipartisan basis in both the House and the Senate. And our council advocated for bipartisan support in the House. That bill passed with a vote of 402-2. And in the Senate, Senator Orrin Hatch introduced it when he was still in Congress with Senator Dianne Feinstein, and it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate as well, and was signed into law under President Trump. So that was the first piece of legislation that the council advocated for, and we were successful in it. And then just recently, we helped advocate for bipartisan support for the No Hate Act, which was part of the COVID-19 hate crimes bill that was signed into law by President Biden over the summer of this year. So we've seen its success.
Yes. And what is the enforcement for these acts?
The first one, again, they all fall under the Department of Justice's preview, where it allows the federal government tools that it did not previously have in investigating and going after these threats that were issued against these religiously affiliated institutions. And regarding the No Hate Act, the Jabara-Heyer No Hate Act, I mentioned that every year the FBI releases its annual report on hate crime statistics. And that report requires voluntarily provided information from local law enforcement authorities. And yet that data is incomplete. In the most recent report, there were over 60 large cities with a population of 100,000 or more that did not report any hate crimes to the FBI or reported zero. And that's a major problem. So what this bill does is provides resources to local law enforcement authorities, be it, training, helping to institute hotlines, or to help increase engagement with local community members so they feel comfortable coming forward to report these hate crimes. So in order for the FBI to get better data for their annual report, we understand that the federal government cannot legislate away hate, but we just need to have better data and information at our hands so then we can figure out how best to address the issue of hate crimes from a societal point of view, whether it be, working with local law enforcement authorities, schools, other institutions to combat this.
Mhm. Well, that's a lot of work. So for those, how many did you say that there were 66 communities that said that there is no hate crime? So evidently, usually that's not the case. And
Yeah.
How are you addressing that then to make to help facilitate better reporting through the act?
Exactly. So that's the thing. It's 60 large cities, and by large, I
Mhm.
mean 100,000 or more people that live in those cities. And of course, there are more beyond that don't report it. And through this act, the Department of Justice will provide resources to these local law enforcement authorities because there's so many different reasons for why they don't report hate crimes. It's either people don't feel comfortable coming forward, they might not have the resources. There's a new system that's been instituted. So for the local law enforcement authorities to submit that information to the FBI, so to be able to provide training, and given everything that a local law enforcement precinct has to go through, that's a lot on their plate as well. So it just helps provide some resources. But in addition, you don't have to wait for federal resources to do this. This can all be done administratively. So a lot of our regional chapters are working with mayors, attorneys general, other city council members to highlight this issue, make a case for why there's a need for better reporting. And we've seen progress. When we first started looking at these large cities, there were 90 plus large cities that didn't report. And in the most recent report, it was only 60. So we've made some progress on this front in addition to, of course, advocating for the federal passage of the Jabara-Heyer No Hate Act.
Mhm. And for how receptive are the mayors and the legislators to helping facilitate reporting?
I don't think anyone's against better data.
Mhm.
That's the other, the issues that we focus on. It's always making sure that it's an issue that crosses party lines. It's just understanding the need and highlighting these issues. A lot of times, people are so overwhelmed with the things that they have to do, and just making sure that this is an issue that they should be paying attention to. People have been very receptive and seeing progress.
Since a lot of listeners now, they might be experiencing hate crimes, and then they might be in that category that is uncomfortable about reporting. How could you reassure them now and about reporting, and then how could they report safely?
I think first of all, if they're in any trouble, of course, their first line of defense is to contact law enforcement authorities, contact 911, and they should be reporting it, but they should also reach out to the FBI. There's a hate crimes website that the Department of Justice has set up, and you can report directly to the FBI, in addition to, of course, reaching out to your local police precinct. But the first thing is always make sure that you're safe, but you should also reach out directly to the FBI, and the information is on the Department of Justice's hate crimes website.
And they don't have to worry about the statute of limitations running out. If it happened earlier and they still want to report, can they still report?
I can't speak for every state and their local laws, but I think they should feel free to reach out and discuss it with the local law enforcement authority. It depends on, how things are set up across different cities and states.
in other words, there's no harm in trying. Please try anyway. Okay, what is the usual reasons that people do not want to report?
There are a number of things. Sometimes it's, of course, if it's a major crime, you should be reporting it. But if someone just is getting a slur, faces a racial slur, or this graffiti, the thing is to just let it go, or the fear of additional backlash from the perpetrator. Sometimes we've heard from people that they fear, they don't have trust in the local law enforcement authority, that they might not be taken seriously. They don't want to draw attention to such things. No one wants to play the victim card. There are a number of reasons why people don't feel comfortable reporting, and it depends on the kind of hate crime that they are faced with.
And are you able to tell us which, does it depend on the place? What is the most common hate crime that people face?
I think it depends. I think it depends. Graffiti is a lot, hate crime, swastikas being painted on synagogues or in school institutions. It depends on the city and state. There are a number of different types of hate crimes that take place every year, sadly, across this, around this country.
Mm-hmm. And that second piece of legislation, what is the federal legislation? I do not recall the name, but for reporting, what is the second piece of legislation that you helped to pass?
We helped advocate for the passage of the Protecting Religiously Affiliated Institutions Act. It's a mouthful, but what it does, it expands federal protection to include religiously affiliated institutions like the JCCs, the Islamic centers, and it ups the penalty for anyone found guilty of making credible threats against these institutions. Before, the penalty was a misdemeanor. Now it's a felony of up to 3 years in prison.
So when was that passed?
It was passed signed into law in 2018, I believe. I could be.
So it was signed into law by President Trump?
Yes.
And afterwards, was there any, do you know of any cases that were adjudicated on account of being covered under this act?
So usually these crimes are part of a larger, there are a number of tools that the law enforcement authority uses to charge people with these crimes. And yes, we have seen instances where this particular provision that was passed under this law was used in addition to others to charge people who perpetrated crimes against religiously affiliated institutions around the country. Yes.
And do you think that the people who commit these acts, do they realize now that since this legislation passed, that the penalties are higher, or usually they don't even know and they just perpetrate the crime?
We're hoping, one of the deterrents against anyone committing these crimes is the fact that it's no longer a misdemeanor, it's a felony that goes on the federal record. So that's one way to help deter anyone from committing these crimes. But I don't know if that's going to completely deter from anyone. That's going to completely deter anyone from committing these acts. I think if there's hate in someone's heart and if they want to commit these crimes, they will.
And how extensive has the mainstream media coverage been to make it known about, to publicize both pieces of legislation?
For the Jabara-Heyer No Hate Act, given the unfortunate rise in hate crimes against, in particular, the Asian American communities, this is one piece of legislation that helps address that recent spike in crimes against this particular target. So I think there has been significant coverage. Unfortunately, there's so many cases that we've seen, but I don't think it's just focusing on these pieces of legislation. I think it's looking at this issue holistically and everyone realizes, given the increase in anti-Semitic crimes, anti-Muslim crimes, the mainstream media has been pretty receptive into covering this issue.
At this point, is there what is the trend now? Is it about steady? Is the are hate crimes going up, down? Have you had any indications of what it is now?
Unfortunately, hate crimes has been increasing. The most recent report showed the highest number of reported hate crime incidents since 2008. We've seen a steady increase against crimes against the Asian American community, African American community, even anti-white crimes have increased. But like I said, we don't know the complete picture because not every city and jurisdiction is reporting. And since this is voluntarily submitted, we just have to, this shows a disturbing trend, but we can't say that it's going down or up against one particular community till we get accurate data from everyone.
Mm-hmm. How much how extensive should the reporting be before you get data that that will be useful? And approximately, have you any idea about how many years that you need to accumulate data in order to address the problem better?
Well, we have data or information from the Bureau of Justice Statistics that's also part of the Department of Justice, and it estimates that annual hate crime reporting is around 250,000 hate crime incidents, and what's reported by the FBI is close to 8,000 incidents. So there's a huge gap between what the Bureau BJS reports and what's actually submitted by the FBI, and we know it has to be somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like I said, until we have information coming from every city and state, we won't know the complete state of hate crime incidents in the country.
Yeah, 250,000 number. How do you have any idea how that number is estimated?
The Bureau of Justice Statistics has this methodology that's in place, and I am no statistician, so I would defer you to check out the Department of Justice's website and reach out to them to figure out, the exact methodology that they go through.
So are these, do you know if these are the actual reported number or is the estimated number based on incidents and population? Any idea about that?
I think it's based on survey that they've conducted of people across the country. That is where I feel comfortable answering, and then the Department of Justice has its own methodology, and they come out with this data every couple of years. But that's the thing, we rely on government issued data. We don't do this survey ourselves. And we just notice that there are gaps in reporting where we have one Bureau of the Department of Justice reporting one number, and yet what the FBI releases every year is different. The reported numbers are different.
Well, maybe it's on account of the way the FBI categorizes the data. Maybe there are even more cases, but the 8,000 are substantiated cases. Maybe would that be the case, perhaps?
I think there's a federal definition of what a hate crime is, and that's in statute. And it's, again, what's reported. And we just know that the FBI relies on voluntarily submitted information.
And the 8,000 number, have you any idea about what years they cover?
It's an annual report that comes out. So the most recent report that came out in the summer of 2021 was reflective of all the hate crime incidents that had been reported in the year 2020.
Did you get a chance to compare the 2021 report with the 2020, and any observation about the two?
So the 2021 report, the numbers for the year 2021 will not be released until the year 2022. But based on the most recent report, like I said, we've seen that this is the highest number of reported incidents since 2008. We've seen a substantial increase against incidents against the Asian American community, the African American community, even anti-white numbers have grown substantially since what was reported the previous year.
I guess that not only have hate crimes gone up recently across the nation, it seems that all other crime has gone up as well. It's really hard to disentangle the two. Perhaps it's the same trend for the two or not. It's so hard to tell.
I mean, the hate crime report is a standalone report that's released every year, and that characterizes these incidents, and it walks through assaults and other types of incidents that are perpetrated under the hate crimes category.
Have you any idea about the extent of injuries? I know that there's property damage, and do you have any numbers about how property crimes compares with injuries compared with deaths?
Like I said, the FBI's report is very extensive, and it's released every year. It's actually online, so if your listeners are interested, they can go online to look at the way the hate crime numbers are reported and characterized. So they go through, how many of these incidents were related to property damage or assaults and other kinds of other incidents.
Where would the listeners go then to find out this?
So FBI's hate crimes report, it's fbi.gov. And it's the Uniform Crime Reporting. So it's actually a new system where they've got a cloud-based report that's online, and you can sort through the different data.
That's good. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council. What was most difficult about forming the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
One would think that bringing Muslims and Jews together would be the hardest thing, but the most difficult challenge I've had is to bring Democrats and Republicans together to advocate on issues of common concern, because one of the things that we try to do is make sure that the issues we pick are bipartisan, and they're not they're able to go through different party lines, and because we don't want to get caught up in the partisan food fight that's there in the United States politics right now.
And you were able to overcome that then?
Like I said, it's challenging, but that's something that we try to make sure that whatever issue we pick, it's an issue that crosses party lines.
So do you do lobbying, or how do you access these legislators and the Democrats and the Republicans? How does the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council reach them, talk with them?
The issue that we've decided to advocate for is to combat the rise in hate crimes, and that unfortunately, it doesn't care whether the victim is a Republican or a Democrat. So that issue itself lends to us getting access to legislators from different parties, and they're often surprised to see Muslims and Jews on the same side of the issue. So we've managed to shock and awe them into lending their support for the issues that we care for.
We see that your council has a lot of members, a group of members. So how do you find your Muslim Jewish Advisory Council members when we go to your website and see all those members?
So we've, like I said, the relationships had already been built, and because we work with these institutions like AJC, the American Jewish Committee, what we strive for is to make sure that our council members represent different professional fields, and also different, we've got people from different genders, from different institutional backgrounds. But they are not just from the reform or the conservative movement, but across the Jewish religious spectrum. Also, given the makeup of the American Muslim community, we've got African Americans, we've got people of Middle East origin. So we try to strive for a broad representation of the American Muslim and the American Jewish community.
Mhm. How do cities? Well, let's put it this way. Perhaps there are people that want to apply or nominate someone, an individual, to sit on the council. What is that process?
So one, they have to be, be willing to come forward and also identify as a person of faith, of either the Jewish faith or the Muslim Islamic faith. But at this point, because we want to show the different diversity of the two communities, we seek people who are leaders of their professional field and represent different politics, business professions. They can, of course, reach out to us via email, just as you did. Our email address is mjack@ajc.org if someone's interested in being part of this effort, either on the national level or our 11 regional chapters.
And then how do cities start the chapter in MJAC, Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
So right now we're focused on making sure that the council, the existing 11 regional councils are, working on advocacy issues, and they're moving forward and getting success on those issues. We work with AJC's regional chapters. AJC is one of the institutional partners of MJAC, and they've got 24 regional offices around the country, and we rely on the staff members there to help, sort of take on the responsibility of convening the members and setting the agenda and running the membership, because our members are so busy, with their other professional fields, and someone has to help coordinate the councils itself and the advocacy agenda. So we work with the agency offices, and it's a lot of work, and we want to make sure that there's commitment, that members who are part of this realize that there's more that's required. It's just not lending your name to a petition or just signing up for something that comes once a year, but it's active engagement, and they have to be participating and coming forward with ideas. So we check in with all the members who are interested in this to make sure that they're in it for the long haul.
Since you're concentrating on addressing hate crimes now, do the chapters, do most of the work consist of trying to reach their local legislators and local government, public officials, and public servants on this issue?
Unfortunately, the issue of hate crimes is something that impacts all different regions of the United States, and that's something that every council is working for. But that's the idea, that they work on advocating for change on whatever topic that they wish to work on. Every council is free to decide on whatever domestic policy agenda that they want to see a change in, but it has to be an issue that impacts both communities, that we're able to see tangible results as a result of the joint advocacy. And that's what we strive to do.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us some examples about how different branches have different agendas?
It really comes together from what the members would like to work on. We've got an example in New York where there was a legislation that was introducing an office dedicated to combating hate crimes that would be part of the New York City mayor's administration. And that was an issue that the council members decided to advocate for change. They reached out to other city council members to make sure that they supported this legislation. And it passed on a bipartisan basis and was set up very quickly.
But there are some other cities that don't concentrate that much on the hate crimes. What other topics are on like a typical agenda or on some of the agendas? Just for an example.
Examples can be, advocating for making sure that there's the school calendar recognizes Muslim and Jewish holidays. That's one example, or making sure that if there's access to kosher and halal food in the public school systems. Those are just two other examples in addition to hate crimes legislation that the councils have successfully advocated for and brought around change.
Yeah, actually, I think we just had I just read a news report about a local high school with the students complaining about not getting access to halal food.
And if that's something that is something that our local regional chapters decide they want to advocate for, that would be an issue that they would feel that we would be supportive in them reaching out to their local elected officials to make sure that there's change.
So some of the benefits of being in the council is that you have some established practices, right, about how to access the local officials to facilitate change instead of like them doing it themselves. If they have the backing of the council, it's easier for citizens to make change.
Exactly, and that's why we partner with an institution like AJC, the American Jewish Committee, that helped found the council, because AJC is an established organization and is able to help facilitate these types of meetings. And we use the system that's already in place, because the change is so immediate that we rely on these institutional bodies to help get us access to these local officials.
Mm-hmm. Are there other cities that are in the process of becoming a branch city?
We've been in conversation with a few, Chicago being one of them, but we just have to make sure the timing is right. And of course, given everything that's surrounding, the pandemic, we want to make sure that when the members meet, they're able to meet safely. And it's hard to build relations over Zoom or Teams or these online platforms.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what neighborhood the possible council will be in Chicago?
We have no set. If it would cover the entire city or even the state of Illinois. So let's see. We're just in early conversations.
Mm-hmm. And do you know when these conversations started for the Chicago area?
We've been in conversation for quite some time. It's just, a number of different factors to make sure that it starts off with an advocacy issue that impacts both communities. It's an ongoing conversation. There's no set date, to say that this is when we started. It all depends on the bandwidth and making sure that when a formal council comes together, that there's meaningful change. But the relations between the Muslim and the Jewish community in Chicago is already pretty strong.
So I guess what you're saying is that first there has to be an issue, and then second, there has to be some people that are willing to try to work on this issue, and then it has to be that some of these people reach out to Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, and then you start working together with them to and then come what may.
That is one order of how a council is formed. Sometimes it's the members are already there, and they've been advocating for change for quite some time, and they just want to formalize it. It depends. It depends on each city. We've got chapters like the one in Louisville, Kentucky, they already had strong bonds between the Muslim and Jews there, and they had advocated for change. They had come in and stepped up to help one another when there were challenges that the Louisville chapter had faced, the Louisville community of Muslims and Jews had faced. And it was just a matter of formalizing this into a regional chapter.
Mhm. Do you know what issues the Louisville chapter was facing? Was it also hate crimes, or was there something else too?
It was a hate crime. It was, graffiti that had been spray painted on a mosque over there, and then, shortly after, the local JCC had also experienced hate, and again, Muslims and Jews stepped up and were there for one another. So like I said, the relationship had already been there prior to them coming together and formalizing it under the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council umbrella.
Even in Chicago, I do recall that when I heard on the news about either a mosque experiencing graffiti or a synagogue, the other side, if it were the synagogue, then Muslims would come out, or if it were a mosque, then the Jewish people would come out to lend support during a news conference about the incident.
Exactly, we see that incidents like that unfortunately happen all the time, where groups are targeted, but the positive side of that is that they get such a overwhelming support from Muslims, Jews, and others. And we've seen that, after the Pittsburgh massacre that took place a couple of years ago, the Muslim community stepped up and raised funds to help the victims. So we see those incidents that take place all the time, and it's not under the umbrella of MJAC. So we just want to highlight these contributions, the positive image of Muslims and Jews in America.
Absolutely. Was it on account of the Pittsburgh massacre that the Philadelphia chapter was the first chapter to be the initial chapter that was established?
Unfortunately, no. Like I said, the Pittsburgh massacre took place only a few years back, but the Pittsburgh chapter had been in place, more than 5 years ago.
I see. What are the main differences amongst the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council branches? I know that different advocacy issues, and then are there any other differences among them?
Not that much, I think it's just the makeup of the council itself. There's some cities that have a stronger presence of, say, the Boston community or the Somalian community. So you might have more representation from that, but there's not much difference between the chapters in terms of the membership. It's the advocacy issues that really differentiate them.
And the main similarities among city Muslim Jewish Advisory Council branches?
The fact that there are issues that impact both Muslims and Jews equally, and unfortunately, the issue of hate crimes is something that's front and center across different chapters of the council.
I know that you said that you want to address one issue at a time, so but it's really, really hard to totally eradicate the hate crimes. Are there any other issues that you're able to also fit onto your plate, despite having to still address hate crimes?
There are always issues that come up, and we lend our support to those issues. But the main focus, we encourage our councils is to make sure that they stick to that one issue and are able to show results because of the advocacy that's been done under the MJAC umbrella. But there've been times when an issue step has come forward that demanded our attention. There've been incidents where there've been reports of Muslim inmates not being able to get access to halal food, or it's just an issue that we've voiced our concern surrounding that and brought it to the attention of the powers that required that issue to be brought forward to, and we've seen some change regarding that. So it's not just focusing on that hate crime, but like I said, we try to make sure that the focus remains on bringing change to whatever advocacy issue that the council members decide to focus on.
Mhm. So like in the case of halal or kosher food, you have seen progress in the council's work on that too in some cities.
Yes, in some cities.
So that's in schools, in prisons, any other places.
No, I'm, so far the two examples, at least that have been brought to our attention, has been those two areas.
Mhm. Do you have any idea about any work that council is doing among interested members in the neighborhood of Rogers Park in Chicago?
I'm sure that, we don't have an affiliate in Chicago,
Mhm.
but our members have strong relations. The communities know each other, they're there for each other. And so I'm sure that the local Muslims and Jews are working in that area. But MJAC itself does not have a formal chapter in Chicago.
Mhm. Right. How has the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council made a difference in business?
We've recently been in conversation with a lot of businesses surrounding the issue of diversity, inclusion, and making sure that the different groups are have their voices heard, and we've been in conversation with Muslims and Jews in the medical field, where they just want to come together and talk about the issues that are impacting them.
Mhm. Is it are they facing discrimination, or what kind of issues are our businesses facing in terms of diversity and inclusion?
I think it's just about workplace accommodation. It's, they've brought up how do they get to celebrate the religious holidays, like taking time off for Hanukkah or other Jewish celebrations, or for Muslims, the accommodation that's taking place when they are fasting for the month of Ramadan, or when they want to take time off to celebrate Eid with their family. And it's just making sure that there's a discussion around these topics and what can be done to help make sure that people are able to celebrate their religious holidays and their affiliation without being discriminated against, and just highlighting that issue.
Mhm. And have you have some of the councils been able to achieve progress concerning this?
We've just been in conversation to highlight these issues. It's not our main advocacy focus. Like I said, we focus on making sure that there's legislative change, but that does not mean that we're not in conversation with business groups.
Mhm. What about new business owners? Do they come to you for any help? And if so, in concerning what issue?
We haven't had any conversation with new business owners regarding that, but our council members have prominent business leaders, and they're able to draw on their experience of working on MJAC and being part of this institution to build relations and to highlight the challenges that religious minorities in the field of business might face. So they've drawn on that experience, but this is not something that MJAC's been focused on. It's not our primary focus.
And well, I understand that it's not your primary focus, but of course, there are people that they're concerned, like you said, the employees are concerned about not being able to celebrate their religious holidays and having the accommodations. What about so that's on the employees end? Any issues on the employers end that the council the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council has worked with?
Unfortunately, not so far, but if there are people that are interested in highlighting this issue, I'm sure we can be in conversation with them.
How has the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council made a difference in politics?
I don't think it's a difference in politics. It's been a difference in policy. One of the things that by just jointly advocating together and showing that Muslims and Jews can be on the same side of the issue. We've just changed the perception of our respective faith groups in America. And that's one of the objectives of our council. It's just not to advocate for change on the issue of hate crime, but to show that American Muslims and Jews are part of the fabric of American society. And that's something that we're doing in addition to this advocacy work. We've launched our presence on social media. We've got Twitter and Facebook accounts, and we're producing these videos, just showing the ethos of our council and to show that, we're in every sector of society: healthcare, sports, armed services. I think it's just changing the perception. And we're hoping that, our identities aren't pitted against each other just to score political points.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when people realize that the two sides are working with each other instead of against each other, how do you see their perceptions change, and does it how does it help their perception? Are they more likely to work with you? Have you seen progress in that on that front?
I think the fact that we're working on issues that cross political lines, we've built relations with just not our, between our members, but with our local community, that it just changes that perception, and we won't see tangible. I can't point to a specific example that, as a result of MJAC working together, this person's mindset changed. But I think it is a shift, a gradual shift that we'd be able to look back, 5-10 years down the road, that we can point to MJAC's advocacy work, or our just highlighting the contributions that the two communities make every day as a way to hopefully change the perception of the two communities for the betterment of society down the road.
Are there any artists that are helping the cause, that are highlighting to using their platform and their art to highlight the work of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
I think it's specific, but it's more, we've got, like I said, a large following on social media, and we've got a range of followers, prominent elected officials, ambassadors, people from the media field. Our council includes some prominent members from the entertainment field as well.
Could you name some names, if you could you name some names in the entertainment field, and also the ambassadors, if you can?
So Emmy Rossum is a member of the National Council, who's this, famous actress who's starred on a number of different media projects. And then ambassadors, we've got the former ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, Hussein Haqqani, who's following our social media feed.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just two examples.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. How does the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council best help Muslims? We'll go with the Muslims first, and then the Jews in the next question.
In addition to the advocacy work and making sure that we've got better federal protection on the issue of hate crimes, I think it's just making sure that we have allies in the fight against anti-Muslim bigotry. And it's not an issue that impacts just the Muslims alone. If someone is targeting Muslims, chances are they're also targeting other minorities, and we have to have allies around us to make sure that we're better protected. And in addition to that, building friends from the Jewish community, it's just strengthening our place and just bringing down barriers. Those are just two ways that I hope our council's helping the Muslim community in America.
How does the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council best help the Jewish people?
Similarly, we've seen anti-Semitism is I wouldn't say rising, but it is an issue that remains a challenge here in the United States. And we've seen some deadly attacks against the Jewish community. and it's not on the Jews to help combat it. It's a societal issue. And year after year, the FBI report shows that the largest targets of religious-based hate crimes is the Jewish community, and yet it's less than 2% of the American population. So there's a similarly to how the Muslims need allies to help combat anti-Muslim bigotry. It's our society's it's on the society, the U.S. society, to help combat anti-Semitism. And that's what the council's doing. In addition to elevating, the voices of everyday Jews in different walks of life. And that's what we're trying to do with our social media presence and online presence is to not just show that the Muslims and Jews are victims of hate crimes, but they're also contributing members of the American society.
Could you give us maybe one or two examples of that for our listeners?
Examples of
the contributing members, right? I didn't get a chance to look closely at your post, but you mentioned that you highlight the contributions of Muslims and of Jews, and maybe you could give us some examples of that. Just
we see that
just
every day. Sure. So I was going to say, we see this every day, when you go to your doctor's office, or if you're in the healthcare field, Muslims and Jews are working together side by side on, especially during this pandemic, the contributions of Muslims and Jews and other minorities is tremendous in helping us make sure that we're protected against this pandemic. So that's just one example. We've got Jews and Muslims in the armed services, in the sports sector, and and the cooperation is taking place every day. We just want to elevate that and highlight that, and to make sure that people see Muslims and Jews not just as victims or against one another, but also as people living side by side and being just regular members of the American society.
Oh, that's very important. That's good, because you're highlighting everyday heroes.
That's the idea.
Who are the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council's other collaborators?
We work with a number of different organizations. The Sisterhood of Salam Shalom is one organization. We've carved a special niche for ourselves at MJAC in terms of advocacy, but the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom has seen tremendous growth where women come together and get to know one another on a more personal level. There's also, other councils, other interfaith organizations. So we collaborate with a number of institutions on the issue of hate crimes, and especially regarding the Jabara-Heyer No Hate Act. It was a collective effort to make sure that the issue is bipartisan and gets through the House and the Senate and gets signed into law.
Any examples offhand, if you remember, of the organizations that have collaborated with you concerning this?
Of course, the Asian American community has been tremendous in making sure that, in the successful passage of the Jabara-Heyer No Hate Act, we've got representatives from different advocacy organizations like Engage, the Leadership Conference. It's not just specific to faith groups, but others as well.
Is the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council a 501c3?
Because the American Jewish Committee has helped co-convene MJAC, and AJC is a 501c3 organization. So yes, our council is.
I see. Does the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council have any detractors? And if so, how does the council address these detractors?
Of course, like any group, we do have our detractors, and our posture has always been to engage with them. We find that the criticism or the detraction comes as a result of misconceptions of what the council's doing. So we are open to engagement.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM, and we are interviewing Natalia Mahmud of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, MJAC, via Zoom. Concerning the detractors, you said that you engaged them, and then, of course, if you can, could you give us some examples and about some success stories, if you have them, about engaging these detractors, and then maybe as a result, they understand the council better, and then do not detract as much or anymore.
Of course, there are many examples. Some things that we have off the record conversations, so I can't name specific people that we've engaged with, but we're always, our posture is to listen to the other side, to hear about the reasons for why they're critical of our work or of the council's work, or the organizations that are affiliated with the council. So I think the fact that we're willing to engage is something that's always disarming to the detractors, and we're always willing to listen and to hear. And if there are things that can be changed or should be changed, we're always willing to go through that process. And I think that openness has helped the council. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are those that don't want to listen. They're set in their ways and ideas, and we're also, respectful of that. But as long as the engagement is done in a positive and in a respectful manner, I think it has led to change and people softening their views.
Mm-hmm. The detractors, what issue do they detract? What issue are they objecting to that they're distancing? Well, that they don't see the MJAC side. And
I think it's just the issue of the fact that we work with organizations that like AJC or the Islamic Society of North America, or there's so many others, and there are misconceptions about the work of those institutions, or the kind of there's always this fear of a hidden agenda. Oh, why are you working with that side? Don't you know this is what they're aimed to do, and you're just a pawn in the larger scheme of things that the other side wants to do. So I think that, like I said, it's a misconception. It's just wary of this change and realizing, we're just organizations that's just trying to advocate for change, and we try not to stay to engage in partisan politics that just, like I said, we shock and awe them into coming along with us as we try to make our case.
So what in your background helped you become a program director for Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
So I've got a graduate degree in public policy. I've served in the government, and as a result of my policy background, I have been able to work on the advocacy issue that the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council has been engaged with for the past couple of years.
Can you tell us where you worked in government before?
So I was a program examiner for the White House Office of Management and Budget.
Under what administration?
Well, I was a career employee, but it happened to be under the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. And so again, looking at a lens from a nonpartisan point of view.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did you get that position out of college?
I was an intern there during my second year of my master's degree, and while I was finishing up my degree, they offered me a full-time position, and I said yes.
Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And how how did you get invited to be program director, or did you apply to be program director at Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
As a minority myself, I've always been the token Muslim female person in every sitting, and I've been part of these coalition groups, even when I was in the government, when I was in the private sector. So when I heard about MJAC, it had already been formed when I learned about it, and the work that I was doing. I was fascinated to see a coalition of Muslims and Jews coming together and advocating of change. So it seemed like a perfect blend of something that I was doing on the side at various jobs that I'd held, and also making use of my policy degree. So that's what attracted me to the council.
So before the council, have you worked with the Jews before? Jewish organizations?
Well, I don't know about organizations, but as a minority, as someone who who eats kosher and halal food, the first thing when I move to any city or town is to make sure I find my closest halal options, and if that's not available, then of course Muslims are able to eat kosher food. So I think that in general, the practices, there's so much similarity between the two faiths that there's a natural affiliation to the Jewish community that I've always had.
Well, I didn't even know that. So kosher food is sufficient to cover halal guidelines?
It is, because it follows the same practices.
What about vice versa?
Unfortunately, no, because of the dietary restrictions on the Jewish community regarding shellfish and other permissible things. But given how the faith has progressed, the Jewish faith is much older. So Islam draws on Jewish traditions, Christian traditions, and the food. The dietary requirements for Muslims is very similar to what it is for Jews. So we're able to have kosher food. Unfortunately, it doesn't work the other way.
Mm-hmm. What are your gatherings like? Does the council have, not recently because of the pandemic, but when you do have gatherings and parties, what is the food like? How do you implement such gatherings? Social gatherings of the council?
We try to have kosher food because, again, that covers the dietary requirements of our Jewish members and also the Muslim members. Mm-hmm. But whenever we've met, it's always prior to the pandemic. We used to have in-person meetings where we would have an internal side of our business agenda and also have an advocacy focus, a public gathering. We've also met for retreats, and we've talked about the strategic vision for our council, which is when it's now celebrating its 5-year anniversary.
Mm-hmm. What day is the anniversary date?
I don't think we have. It was sometime in October. I have to find the actual date. We haven't celebrated the actual date, but it's just we go year by year.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the milestones for the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, MJAC?
I was going to say, there is no model for the kind of work that we're doing. If I can say this, even though we're celebrating our 5 years, it is still an experiment. There's no set path that we follow. We're learning along the way. But the fact that 5 years later, we're able to celebrate, advocacy achievements that are more public, but also the relationships that have been built between council members, and we're delving into issues that are, not the policy objectives that we've started off with, but it's just lended itself to having a discussion about stereotypes and tropes that are associated with our communities, and just the fact that we're still strong 5 years later, despite, challenges that we faced along the way, external challenges, but the council is still strong.
Mm-hmm. So you said, so in other words, you're saying that in the beginning, it was mostly advocating against hate crimes, but now you're also addressing stereotypes and tropes as well. Is that what you meant?
Yes, we've had these conversations, over, there've been incidents where we've seen tropes and stereotypes that have come up against the Muslim community, the Jewish community. And it's a result of the conversations we've had amongst our members where they realized, we wanted to have a deeper understanding of each other's communities because, in order to be good allies, you have to have that education. So we've been fortunate, we're Deborah Lipstadt, who's a member of our National Council. She's an expert on, addressing anti-Semitism, combating anti-Semitism, and as a professor at Emory University, where she talked about, the history of anti-Semitism and where these stereotypes and tropes come from, which might have been elementary for our Jewish members, but it was eye-opening for the non-Jewish members of our council. That's just one example of something that we started to engage in.
And did you find that the stereo and tropes were partly responsible for instigating some of the hate crimes?
I mean, I'm sure there are reasons, where there are ugly stereotypes associated with each community, and that is one of the ways that, if they're not checked, can lead to larger incidents where, we've seen deadly attacks against the Jewish community in Pittsburgh, in New York City, and other parts of the country.
How do you draw a line? How would you say that you would draw a line between stereo and tropes and freedom of expression?
I think it's just as long as those don't lead to attacks against the community, but that understanding, that misconception, the tropes, that hateful rhetoric, in order to understand where that's coming from, we need to have that understanding of these terms that are associated with the Jewish community and the Muslim community. And if someone hears that hateful rhetoric, it's better to have an ally from that community address it rather than pointing fingers the other way. Isn't it more powerful for a Muslim to stand up against anti-Semitism that might be coming from the Muslim community or someone who happens to be Muslim, rather than the Jewish person stepping in and telling a Muslim that, what they're saying is wrong? So it's better to build allies and to confront it from all walks of society.
Well, that's a major strength of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council to be able to do that, because, for instance, we have some experience with moderating some Facebook groups, and then of course we get the backlash about freedom of expression, and then controlling hate speech. So yeah, that is very important, because a moderator, admin, deleting or removing hate speech is much different from an actual like the opposite side actually speaking against something like that, the hate speech.
Exactly. You want allies, and it's every time we have these conversations, even as someone who's a program director of this council, I learn so much when I hear from my Jewish friends talking about stereotypes and tropes that are often used against the Jewish community.
So have you worked with the Asian community too, since you have this broad experience with addressing this hate? So how are you working with the Asian community?
I think it's just, as like I said, the primary focus of our council is advocacy and advocating for legislation that brings about meaningful change. So when we do pick up an issue, it's just not something that impacts Muslims and Jews. It impacts all minorities. So that's, those specific pieces of legislation is something where we draw on our allies to help us, and that includes the Asian American community. And like I said, in particular with what's taken place in the past year or two with the steep rise in anti-Asian crimes, that unfortunately, we've got allies who are also in the same boat as Muslims and Jews in America.
And could you just list some of the organizations that you have worked with concerning these two pieces of legislation?
There's some that come to my mind. It's the I believe it's a Committee for 100. I don't want to mispronounce the name, and there's the Asian American Foundation is another one. There are a number of groups who are working on again similar issues that impact the Asian American community as they do for the Muslims and Jews.
Is there any other legislation that you are working on now to address hate crimes?
There are a couple of issues that were pieces of legislation that have been introduced in various chambers, in the House and the Senate on the national level. We just want to make sure that whichever one we issue, we lend our support to, is something that can gather, bipartisan support and doesn't get stalled, like I said, in partisan politics, because that's something that we try to stay away from. But we have been working with the Department of Homeland Security to look into ways to combat, to raise awareness about the threat of domestic terrorism, and look into ways that community leaders can identify and respond to individuals at risk of mobilizing to violence.
Mm-hmm. Hasn't that work been going on since 9/11?
It has, but unfortunately the shift is now, we're trying to focus on domestic terrorism. It's the recent reports from the Department of Homeland Security, from the Department of Justice show that majority of the crimes committed in the US is stemming from these groups. So just what are the ways that we can look at addressing this threat in a holistic way, so that before it leads to, unfortunately, mass violence.
Mm-hmm. So is Amtrak working with the Department of Justice and FBI too to lack of a better word, to develop policy, because they would know the best about what's happening, and you would know the best about how it's affecting you and how it's affecting the community. So how are these both sides working together? These two sides.
We're in constant communication with members of the Department of Justice, from the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and in exactly as you mentioned, conversations about what policies are coming from the federal government and how they're impacting the local communities, religious minorities in particular, and just having that conversation so that we're able to, our needs are kept in mind as the departments are setting policies on these types of issues. So we're in constant communication, and it's been, regardless of administration, we've always been welcomed by these federal agencies.
Mm-hmm. Could you describe some of the needs that you have that are also that the Department of Justice and FBI are willing to address because they are working with you?
Just some of the things that come, there can be small, as making sure there's language access, because the American Muslim community in particular is a young community that is of different backgrounds. So there are a number of language needs that can come up, and that's just one challenge that comes to mind. Making sure that there's better communication between law enforcement authorities and local members of the society, that they feel comfortable addressing them, that, what are some of the ways to help build that relationship, where the fear comes from, what policies to be mindful of, and what making sure that the federal government is not, for lack of a better word, repeating mistakes that had been committed in the past, and making sure that they're learning from it. And just understanding the threat, like I said, in particular against the Jewish community, we see anti-Semitism on the rise, and white supremacist groups in particular, using anti-Semitism as sort of like the backbone for other forms of hate. So that understanding. And like I said, I think just this education on the tropes and stereotypes that are being used against the communities. I think if our law enforcement authorities understand that, it's only going to help in addressing this issue.
It's members of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Councils also working with local law enforcement, and if so, in what ways, do you know?
It's an ongoing conversation. It's making sure that there's open lines of communication where they're inviting them to, whether it be faith leaders, inviting local law enforcement authorities to come and address them at their mosques, synagogues, making sure they understand the security needs that could come across as you see a rise in hate crimes. It's again, making sure that there's education, understanding, and ways that the two sides can cooperate. And we've, one example that comes to mind is our Dallas MJAC. Every year it hosts an iftar, which is the coming together to open the fast that Muslims keep during the month of Ramadan. Mm-hmm. And it's for the past couple of years, it's always been hosted at a synagogue. And in addition to making sure that community members are there, they've invited the FBI special agent in charge or local elected officials to just address and highlight the issues of what they're working on, and making sure that they are that they're visible and that they're able to open these lines of communication so that any member of the community, when there is unfortunate need in seeking help from these law enforcement authorities or local elected officials, that they know who to turn to.
So yeah, that's an excellent example. Do you find that once you're able to achieve such a line of communication, are members of the community then, as a result, more willing to report hate crimes if they arise because of that open communication?
That is one hope that comes. We're not able to track it, but that is our hope and desire, that people feel comfortable coming forward and reporting hate crimes if they've been a victim of a hate incident.
Do people sometimes, since they know that Muslim Jewish Advisory Council exists, when people experience hate crimes, do they sometimes come to you and ask for advice?
We have been contacted by people when they're concerned, but they're not sure whether they should report it or not, and but it's never been anything serious enough or life-threatening enough, because we want to make sure that people know that their first line of communication is always to call 911 or the local law enforcement authority. But we have discussed incidents or where people felt uncomfortable being in situations and they might want to address that. And we, of course, help direct them to either their local law enforcement authority, their local FBI special agent in charge, or to the national team that's based in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. But that's not our primary role, and we don't encourage people to do that, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. When since you're now addressing stereotypes and tropes, does that kind of arise from the graffiti crimes and vandalism? Because a lot of them might be instigated from miseducation or lack of education about the two groups, and then that would lead to the stereotypes and then the hate crimes.
The desire is to, how do we best make sure that these stereotypes and tropes are addressed at an early age, and whether the council members should be working with local schools and make sure that this is addressed at a younger age, so it doesn't manifest over the course of years, where it then leads to these horrific crimes, or even like you mentioned, graffiti or other acts of vandalism. So we're in conversation about the best way to address this issue, but at this point, we're still on the making sure that our members understand what these stereotypes are between the two communities, because we might not know that we're engaging in these hurtful stereotypes, and because we want to be better allies, we have to engage our local members and our local communities before we start addressing this issue on a wider legislative or advocacy lens.
Yes. So what you're saying is that your local members and your constituents might not even be aware of how these how these stereotypes and tropes affect them, and so you're in like in the communication phase now, just to help make them aware of that before you start advocating on this issue.
I think that's the approach we're taking right now, is to make sure that there's a better understanding amongst the members before we go out and advocate for change. And you know, it's not something that people might be aware that they're engaging in these hurtful tropes or these stereotypes.
Well, speaking of stereotypes and tropes, there's also history too. Lately, for instance, the African Americans and also the Native Americans, they've been trying to advocate on history, their history not being taught in schools and actually being erased from the curriculum. Is there are the is the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, are they addressing the issue of Muslim history and Jewish history being properly taught in schools?
We haven't engaged on this issue in a formal way. We've had, like I said, you know, we've just been in conversation about the best way to approach this issue. But our focus, at least right now, has been to address bullying of young Jews and Muslims in schools, and how the council can be an advocate for change on that front.
Mm-hmm. How young are the victims? What the bullying victims?
It depends. You know, we've heard incidents. Again, these are examples from our members and you know, family members associated with members. They're young as elementary school children, middle school, high school. Everyone's got an example of something that they experienced and how best to address it. That's the challenge that we're facing. You know, how do we address this in a meaningful way?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course, bullying is important because a hate crime is a form of bullying. Is there's not much difference.
Exactly, and can impact, you know, children at a young age. It's unfortunate. No one should be a victim of bullying, you know, just because they believe in a certain religious practice.
Mm-hmm.
And our schools should provide a safe space for all minorities.
Well, has the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council spoken with the school administrators about bullying then?
We've had some conversations. Again, it's at an early stage. We're still, you know, every school system has its own set of rules, and it's we're in the process of learning about these systems and figuring out what's the right point of entry for our council or our council members, and how best we can address something that's so challenging.
When you started addressing hate crimes, did you also start you know, like this way, you know, learning about the issue and then before jumping in and suggesting policy?
Exactly, you know, that's what we did. We listened to experts. We invited experts on this topic to come and speak to our council members. So we used to have you know, phone calls or conference calls or in-person meetings with people before we realized, you know, what's the right course of action. And then again, at the same time, there was legislation that was introduced in Congress that just complemented what we were learning.
About how long was this education process, this learning process, before starting to draft the legislation and working with the legislators?
It wasn't that long, you know. Again, the legislation was being drafted at the same time as we were having these conversations with experts. So I would like to say a few months, but it wasn't that long.
Let's do a community assessment with you. WZRD Chicago, being a nonprofit radio station, must be responsible to the community we serve. WZRD is mandated to file quarterly issues with the FCC on non-entertainment community-focused programming. We like to assess the community for these quarterly issue topics with 3 questions. First, what is most important to you? It doesn't have to be concerning the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, but what is most important to you, Natalia Mahmud?
Just making sure that we have a safe space for people of different backgrounds to be able to go to school or work and practice their religious affiliation without fear of backlash.
Mhm. What long-term problem must we address?
Unfortunately, I think it's making sure that people feel comfortable stepping forward if they've been a victim of a hate crime or a hate crime incident.
And what problem must be addressed now?
Like I said, I think it should be making sure that people know who to contact if they've been a victim of a hate crime, and that is their local law enforcement authority.
Touching on that, have you ever received complaints about their reporting to local law enforcement, but not getting an adequate response?
We haven't seen reports of that nature, but we do, what we've been told by the FBI is that in addition to reporting any incident to their local law enforcement authority, which is always the first line, that they should be line of defense for any victim, it's to also contact their local FBI office or the National FBI office, the headquarters in Washington, D.C., to make sure that that information is also complementing what's being sent forward to the local law enforcement authority.
That is very important information. So how would someone contact the FBI or the national? Is it contact the local FBI as well as the national FBI, or just one is sufficient?
I think the one is significant or sufficient, but there's a website, it's justice.gov/hate crimes, that I would recommend your listeners to use if they want to reach out to the FBI regarding reporting hate crimes.
Justice.gov/hate crimes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's the first time I kind of heard backslash. It's usually like /.
I think it could be / / but / hate crimes.
Okay. Yeah, it might be, it's, I just want, well, anyway, listeners, if backslash doesn't work, use /. That's it. Okay. Well, that's very important information. Okay. Well, Natalia Mahmud of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, do you have any other comments and suggestions? And also, let's put it this way too. Did you have any mentors in your work, because you are doing very significant work?
Yeah, I'm learning all the time from different people. It's from, whether it's looking at issues on an advocacy front, I've learned from people when I worked in the government, but lately I've learned a lot from, in particular, my Jewish colleagues about the issue of anti-Semitism and the tropes and stereotypes, and just being better educated on that front. And so that's more recent, but I've been fortunate to have mentors from different walks of life, religious leaders, policy professionals, professors, and I'm fortunate that a lot of them are members of our National Muslim Jewish Advisory Council.
Mm-hmm. So policy professionals are these other people, the Mhm. Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. What about you? Do you mentor? Because you do have a wealth of knowledge. Do you mentor anyone?
I do on a formal basis, but I'm open to, helping out anyone who's interested in this particular issue. I've mentored people along the way in my professional background and professional life as I've made my journey from the government to the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council.
Mhm.
And I hope I'm a good mentor.
Did you do anything in between your government position and your position here as program director of Muslim Jewish Advisory Council?
I worked as a consultant for a little bit in between,
Mhm.
and advising people on how to navigate, different government regulations.
Mhm. Any final thoughts? Any advice for our listeners?
I wouldn't, again, thank you so much for having me on. I would like to say that, the issue of hate crimes is a nonpartisan one. We just want to make sure that there's better data, and one way to get that is to make sure that people feel comfortable reaching out if they've unfortunately been a victim of a hate crime incident.
And better data lends itself to what? Just to clarify, because some people might not even realize how important data is.
Mhm. Well, it just helps better policy. Once we have better data, it can be used by our school systems, by our policy officials, by business leaders to make sure how best to address the issue of hate crime incidents. But we just need to make sure that we have that knowledge before we come up with ways to combat the rise in hate crimes. And it's not on one particular society's to address that. It has to be taken at a holistic lens.
Mhm. In other words, uh, if there is hate crime, there are many segments of society that contribute to it. It's not as simple as just perpetrator and crime, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Natalia Mahmud of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, for joining us at WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today.
Thank you.